Blackballed, blackballed, blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. When Russia conducted their illegal invasion of Ukraine, and I'm talking about Crimea, actually, when they annexed Crimea, we began to see regular Ukrainian people sort of step up and do a job they probably never imagined themselves doing before Crimea was annexed. When Russia invaded in February of this year, a similar trend started to emerge where I would notice, at least through my social media contacts, a huge spike in sort of patriotism from Ukrainian Canadians and Ukrainians living outside Ukraine, and obviously Ukrainians living inside Ukraine. One of the more fascinating aspects of the war actually has been how all of the conventional wisdom regarding Russia's military versus Ukraine centered around how much of a disadvantage Ukraine seemed to have on paper. And when I had John Spencer on, he informed me that much of the credit for the some of the successes that Ukraine's been able to muster during this war has been as a direct result of the bravery of regular men and women who joined civilian forces or did whatever they could behind the scenes to sort of make the road to a Ukrainian victory even more apparent. My next guest is such one of those people. He's a Ukrainian Canadian. He is, I said CEO. I'm not sure if he's a CEO or not, but he's basically one of the main guys at a place called Heart of the World, Ukraine. And his name is Alex Fesiak. Alex, how are you, buddy?
I'm good.
Now, you're coming to us from Kyiv, and before we started, I was like, you live in the dopest apartment in a war-torn area. But it turns out that's just a backdrop.
It is just a backdrop, yeah.
I'm not trying to give away your secret ingredients here, but when you walked away, you disappeared, and I was like, this is very strange. And then I realized I'm not on mushrooms this time, and it's actually
I went for a dip in the pool, yeah.
That's right. I wanted to start, as I told you off air, with I was reading. I'm going to put up this Daily Mail article as I was doing my deep dive on you today, and it's kind of a mouthful. I'll try to read it competently and swiftly. But there were so many interesting caveats of this, and I think you sort of touched on it before we went on air, but I'm just going to read it out loud now. Exclusive. Ukrainian family from Canada tells how they quit their day jobs to mix Molotov cocktails, run drones and bulletproof vests to the front lines, and even dance the tango with troops after Russia's invasion of their homeland. Alex Fesiak and his family were raised in Canada but have returned to their homeland of Ukraine to help support troops fighting Russia. The former IT salesman, 54, and his Ukrainian... This is the part. This is one of the parts. And his Ukrainian girlfriend, Natalka, teamed up with his UK school teacher daughter, Sonia Fesiak, to provide aid to the frontline battalions. I'm going to stop myself there for a second. And we shared a little bit of a laugh, but it is kind of true. The way they word that, you would never know. You would never know that your fiance, Natalka, has her very own independent and really impressive story when it comes to this kind of work. Can we earn you money points, but also doing it by saying the truth so we can clarify the important role of Natalka in what you guys are doing today?
Right. To unpack that article, it's interesting that you found that article. That is a sort of a long winding story about that article, but it was basically through one of my daughter's contacts, a reporter that works at the Daily Mail, I believe it is, and so he interviewed Natalka and I, and we were quite accurate, with all the details, and then they post the article, and the Daily Mail is very sort of tabloidish, right? Yeah. So I'm not saying they're not facts in there. It's just the way they utilize the wording and the way they position certain things. It's actually quite funny at times, right?
I'm going to put it up again. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'll get back to you in a second. But when I put it, it feels like there's, first of all, their headline is like 1,000 words, right? It's really, it must be weird to get on a phone. And second of all the bullet points that go after that, they were just headlines, again, that they decided not to use. That's what it feels.
Right, right.
They write him like that, right? And it's supposed to get clicks.
Well, again, when the reporter, I guess, gets on the line with us and he starts asking all these questions, we answer all his questions, thinking, okay, he's going to take all of this data. Because the information spanned, from 2014 to the present, and the present was, I think it was like the first month and a half or second month of the war. So it's like, the entire world was on edge. Everyone was coming here to figure out what was going on. Reporters, and it was sort of a lot of information.
Yeah,
Right.
when you're dealing with a tabloid reporter, just remember if you happen to mention Molotov cocktails, it's probably going to go in the headline.
It's going to go in the headline.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you probably saw some of the photos in there as well. So
Yeah.
I'll just mention the Molotov cocktail piece. So
Okay.
Natalia Prudutska, my fiance, she's been helping the war effort. Heart of the World Ukraine is her group. It was basically sort of thought of that name during the Maidan. She was actively an active participant at the Maidan, and yes, she made Molotov cocktails for the guys who were pushing back on the government riot troops. So there are
Wow.
photos, and that's what she was doing. She was a big believer in change. That the government was basically, thoroughly corrupt, completely aligned with Russia, and they had to go. And that whole process started during the Maidan. So yes, she was part of that movement.
Okay. Now let's move. One of the things that I talked to you about today over the phone was that I was a little surprised. I don't know why I didn't unearth this the last time I spoke with you on this show. Perhaps I did, but marijuana. Now, but the idea that you are helping the military import badly needed equipment, but it doesn't stop there. You actually have fostered personal like face-to-face relationships with the people on the front line that are the recipients of your equipment. I don't know much about how the dynamics of these things work, but that's pretty rare, isn't it?
So yeah, you know what? It's interesting because we just do what we do day in, day out, and I was sort of surprised that you were surprised in an odd way,
Did you just call me
because
stupid? I'm just kidding.
no,
I'm
well,
just
maybe,
joking.
well, no, I don't think I did.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Go ahead.
It's okay. No, but what I'm getting at is that um, this is the way it's always been done here in Ukraine. So the volunteers have always filled in the gap. And early on, like when the Ukrainian army back in 2014 was getting up on their feet, the Ukrainian volunteer groups, they did just almost everything. With regards to getting uniforms, food, any kind of supplies, even some military gear. They would do that. They would get vehicles and so forth, right? So that network that was established early on has always existed. So if I fast forward to February 24th of this year, with Natalka specifically in Heart of the World, Ukraine. Um, Prior to that, she was trying to kind of phase out of sort of providing that assistance because it was all encompassing. Her entire life was revolved around that. So she wanted to kind of sort of go down her own way, her own path. The war breaks out, and of course, any brigade or military unit that she was helping in the past that now greatly needed assistance. Of course, her phone rang, and that's why we got re-engaged and pulled back into providing assistance, right?
Mhm.
And again, a lot of these people, these soldiers, they were veterans actually, right? So they themselves had fought. She built relationships with these people at the front lines, right, over all those years, and they retired basically. The war breaks out. All the veterans jump right back in, right? So again, she had all those contacts. Everybody knew who she was. Not only that, like she and Heart of the World Ukraine is a very small group of people, which I'm part of.
Mm.
There are many, many other Ukrainian, volunteer groups that have origins right back to 2014 as well. And that's just the way the mechanism works. I'll just touch a little bit more on
Yeah.
sort of the other comment you made about who we contact or who the connection is with, right? So the connection is with frontline soldiers. It could be, the leader of the battalion. It's not generals or anything like that, but it's
Mm.
basically higher level people in these battalions and brigades that will send us a note and say, hey, we're really low on uh, supplies of some sort, right? And then we take it from there. It is a personal connection. I am starting to have a personal connection with some of these folks at the front. James Chalice, which you
Yep.
also know, Canadian boy. He's sort of my personal connection now, being Canadian, right?
Yeah.
Natalka has a multitude of these people that she knows. We help about 22 plus brigades in the Ukrainian military.
Wow.
And pretty much most of those she has connections with. That's important not only because, well, obviously you have the connection with those individuals, but there's a trust factor there. And we don't just, gather donations and just purchase something and just send it out randomly to someone we don't know. We actually do know the people that receive it and utilize, the goods that we send them.
Yeah, the James Chalice, by the way, for people that don't know, he's a Canadian citizen. He's not Ukrainian citizen, and he basically decided that he was going to go and fight for Ukraine. He's a Canadian military guy, correct?
Mhm.
How common is his story?
So there are quite a few foreign fighters
Mhm.
here, and basically, what they do is they will either join the Foreign Legion, or they will try to get in with a Ukrainian battalion or brigade.
Okay.
James early on decided, because and James will be on. He'll explain his story, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But
Hmm.
he originally showed up to Kiev and to Ukraine early on to basically facilitate just learning, teaching. He was a teacher, right?
Hmm.
And then basically from that, he joined a battalion with actually his students, which is an amazing story. That's
Wow,
another
that's a
story.
movie. That's a movie.
It is. It
Yeah.
it really is. So the students were going off to war, and they said James was actually going to join another battalion, and they begged and pleaded and said, just we've got this connection with you, and why don't you just come with us? And he let me know. He goes, I'm going to go with my students, basically.
How inspiring is that for the students? You know?
Oh, it's remarkable. Like, your point of the movie. There was another story. I may have mentioned this the last time
Is
around,
this
so I'm not going to try to.
the Japanese mercenaries or something?
No, no, no,
No.
no. It's with James specifically, but with his students, right? Everything he taught them, and then I think about a month and a half or 2 months in, and you got to remember these are people that are IT guys, reporters, right, lawyers, all joined to fight. They're not professional soldiers, right? This guy, like, think about it. This guy from Canada shows up and sort of teaches a class and takes them through the drills and shows them a bunch of stuff. And this is the way you do it. And then they're off in a battlefield, right? So there was a few times where they were actively in battle zones, taking Russian positions, and I was in awe. Like, I was like, James, do you hear what you're telling me? You've actually taken a Russian position with a bunch of students that you taught in Kiev, which is it's amazing.
Yeah. I read an article, I think it was about 4 or 5 months ago, about how sometimes when nations are at war and foreign fighters are coming in, that weeding process becomes super important because there are some that want to do it for reasons that have nothing to do with liberating a country. James's story is so unique and interesting to me because he wasn't asking to go to the front lines or nothing like that. He was asked to go. And so it makes me feel kind of, more confident in his role as a person who's not from Ukraine but fighting on behalf of their country, knowing that he wasn't there, just raring to go.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I've met a few like that, and the theme what you're talking about is just yahoos. They show up. It's a war zone, and it pulls all sorts of people into these kinds of things. So I've heard it from James. I've heard it from other folks that I know. A lot of these individuals that they show up. They have a particular maybe something in their head that they think they're going to do, or what they're going to see, or how they're going to get involved, and um, they either leave or they get themselves into some major trouble, right?
Yeah.
James is the real thing. He I can't I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud that he's my friend. We help him as much as we can. I'll tell you a little side story, and I'll possibly get choked up about it as well. So early on in the war, we were able to raise funds fairly quickly, right? The spotlight was on what was going on, Ukraine, a lot of my friends. So I mentioned this to you, James, that to date, we've raised about $175,000 US. And basically, with that, we've purchased mostly used vehicles, pickup trucks, SUVs, and so forth for the Ukrainian military, drones, and night vision systems, and then medical supplies. But those are the key, things that we purchase. And recently, there was a brigade that was in Bakhmut, which is just brutal out there. And they had requested radios, Motorola walkie-talkies, secure walkie-talkies, right? Difficult to get a hold of in Ukraine. They're all sold out. Even in Poland, it's difficult. And so we were tasked to, hey, can you guys, contacts of Natalka's, can you folks get us some radios? So we searched around and we acquired 16 of these radios. It was roughly about just under $8,000 US, and we purchased them in the UK. So we purchased the radios through my own account, and then we had volunteers that brought these radios to Ukraine. Unfortunately, it took a long time to get the funding, to get the donations in, to purchase the radios, to bring the radios in. So by the time I went through all this, the rotation already happened with the guys that were in Bakhmut, the 1 battalion. So they're already in Kiev. Now, Natalka, she overheard a discussion I was having with James a couple of days ago, that I can't get into too many details, because
Yep. Okay.
it's his safety is
It's
involved, right?
classified. It's
Um,
classified. I got it. Yeah.
in essence, it is what he's doing and who he's doing it with. But he has a small team that are doing some very strategic things, and they're low on gear. And one of the things they're low on is radios. And so, James he's a great guy. He knew that we had brought these radios in, didn't ask because he knows it's already spoken for, right? Talk overheard this. She did feel, there was an uneasiness with me to hear James say that, right? So when she went to deliver the radios, it wasn't just one battalion; it was a bunch of groups of battalions, right? One of the battalions said, "Look, we're back. We're going back in, like on a rotation, but we don't need all those radios. If please give these things to people that need it in the hottest zones." So she was able to pull 2 of those radios from those guys, and I let James know yesterday. He was in tears. He he mentioned to me they lost a couple of guys because of lack of communication, which made me feel bad because it's one of those things that if I could have, would things have changed? But we can only do what we can do, right? So we sent those radios to him yesterday. He's going to get those today. So
Wow.
it's those kind of interactions where you're making a difference, a small difference, but you're making a difference. And in that case, it could potentially save his life and his team's lives.
Yeah, those are the little sort of caveats that I think are super important, even when you're talking about it and you're explaining it in a way where, like you had the thought of, oh, what if I was more, what if I got these sooner? Could I have saved lives? That is a strong indicator that your motivations are sound. And it's funny because you're also very humble, so I don't expect you to be like, yes, James, that's exactly it. But it's nice. But that's what the audience is hearing when they hear you talk. So I think that's great. And there was never really a question of what motivated you, right? Because everything that I've read and me speaking with you, you have a love for Ukraine. Like it's you are one of those interesting, fortunate people that probably considers two nations his home, right? Like there is, go ahead.
Yeah, I do now. Y- that type's a question I've given it a lot of thought, right? Because there's some friends of mine that are just kind of looking at me sideways, going, "Fesiak, what are you really doing? You should be golfing with us right now. Like, what's going on, right? Like, you
The
you
best I can
have
do,
you,
the best I can do, fellas, is the background. Okay, that's the best I can do.
yeah, that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of well, yeah, to answer your question, yes, I love this country as much as I love Canada. I feel at home here. I feel at home in Canada. I feel the time is now for me to be able to do something to play a
Mm.
part in helping this country, right? You know, I may have mentioned this the last time around. There's kind of these thoughts in the back of my mind, right? Growing up in Canada to parents that came to Canada after World War II, we were raised in a family where the war unfortunately was discussed a lot. World War II, right?
Mm.
Um, Grandparents that were murdered, family members that were killed. My uncle, my dad's brother, died in Auschwitz. His other brother was basically in a multitude of concentration camps, right? So that was always kind of discussed in our family, right? And so this war breaks out, and that's all those thoughts and memories and emotions are all kind of floating around in the back of my mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when I came here, um, my mother was here, and as well as my father visiting. And this is prior to the war. The family members here that met them, they tell their story. The people here, they didn't experience war, right?
Mm.
The particular generation, I'm saying, right? And then all of a sudden, the war breaks out. And to me, that's like, it's almost like I would never say I'm comfortable with it, but because of that family history, right? In
Yeah.
in all of that, it's
It's the
almost
that's
like
yeah.
I,
It's
I don't
funny
know.
with the
I don't know if I'm coming
well, no,
across
I
properly,
think I
but
I think I got it. I think sometimes everything has a silver lining, even bad things. And the war that broke out probably served as an important connecting tissue between generations, so they could sort of be on the same page. Now I get you, Grandpa. Like that kind of thing.
That's that's exactly it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was that. And then just, again, Ukrainian background, and just my desire to help, right? There
We
was something about that.
a viewer, Drew, is mentioning Ukraine is now working on a domestically produced drone. Not better than the Turkish drones, but will be great nonetheless. I'm using that comment to pivot to drones in a way because I find it real. Maybe I'm just like, um, maybe I get excited over things that aren't, all that exciting. But when you told me the last time I had you on in our talks previous to the interview, and I think during the interview as well, that you were help facilitating surveillance drones, like sort of like consumer type drones, right? Like the ones that are about the size like this kind of thing. And
Mhm.
maybe I should ask you where it came from, and that they were being the use of them for surveillance was important, but also they found a way to make it so that these drones could, even though they weren't specifically built for this, were like now dropping grenades onto onto Russian troop positions. I don't know why I find that's like MacGyver's your sergeant. Like it's amazing, and I don't know. Am I giddy because I'm just stupid, or is there like should I be this giddy over this development? Like,
Well, it's no, it's a fact, and it's very interesting. To us, it's just commonplace.
mm,
Um, to us, what I mean by like every battalion has got a team that understands and works with drones. and either these drones are used for reconnaissance, or the drones are used to drop grenades. Like it's not one. It's almost every group within the Ukraine army has a team within it that does that. Right now, this is done with consumer grade drones. So drones that we've acquired, they're all consumer grade. So Mavic, DJI Mavic 2s, Mavic 3s mostly, and some others, but they're consumer drones that these men use. I'll just kind of add a little bit to it. The drones, what they do is they have a particular firmware software on the drone, factory software. What the groups do is they reprogram the software to utilize the drone in a certain way. When you do that, it's less prone to basically jamming
Oh,
by
okay.
the Russians. Yeah, so they have to do that. So there was a bit of a crossover point where a particular firmware, the latest firmware, it was at one point you couldn't hack into it. Basically, you couldn't reprogram it.
Oh,
So they had to basically look for just the previous firmware on those drones. We also have help and know the Aero Rosvitka guys. These are the folks your listener mentioned will be producing their own drones. They have been producing their own drones since 2014. You can Google them. They have their own Facebook page. They came to us because they had a special ops and they needed a special type of vehicle, and
hmm.
so we went and acquired a vehicle like that in Poland for them. Um, but
Yeah.
they're and there's other teams as well in Ukraine that are working on this. Like you got to remember, well, remember just the fact, right?
Hmm.
All the sophisticated weapons that have come here to Ukraine, Ukrainians know how to use them extremely well now.
Yeah,
From
they do seem
javelins to
from the get-go they seem very kind of resourceful. Like, I mean, uh,
right,
yeah.
so what I'm getting at is and I remember the first chat I had with James and others. I asked him, I go, I'm hearing about all these javelins, right? I'm going, have you used a javelin? And he goes, I played with one. I never actually shot one, right? In training, right?
Wow.
Because he was in Afghanistan. He goes, but here, right, just with javelins, like Ukrainians have such an expertise in utilizing that particular weapon. That's one of, right, you can go from that to HIMARS, right? So Ukrainian know-how is like, I would safely say, like no other on in the world, right?
Yeah, that
A lot
that
of these
resonates.
manufacturers, yeah, like a lot of these manufacturers that have made this equipment, I don't think they even had, like no one really utilized it to the extent that Ukrainians have during this war.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Something else that's really resonated is there such thing as a Ukrainian pessimist? Because if so, I haven't seen one. you know, really, like I've been I've watched countless hours of footage of civilians and military leaders, and I've interviewed Ilya Ponomarenko and
Mhm,
Rita Kudik, I think her name is. She's
mhm,
the
mhm.
and wow, like I feel like sometimes I feel like, okay, did these guys all take a class? Like where the media training focused primarily on building confidence and morale among the Ukrainian people, because this is crazy. Like everyone seems so optimistic, and I'm wondering just your personal thoughts on that. Are you like me? Do you kind of feel like, however this ends, and when Russia goes back to their country and Ukraine is liberated, is that going to be seen in hindsight as one of the key ingredients for this victory? Is just that the citizenry itself acted as this collective of confident patriots, and how do you beat that?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I'm inspired day in day out by not only Ukrainian volunteers, but just regular people. Like there's moments that I experience where air raid sirens go off, and everybody is calm. Everyone's going about their business. If somebody needs help, people just they pitch right in. It seems to basically, kind of, it doesn't matter about class, right?
Mm.
You could be someone, driving an expensive car, inexpensive car. It doesn't matter, right? Everybody kind of just understands what needs to be done, or if somebody needs some help. They dive right in, right? And I don't know. I don't know if that's a Ukrainian thing, or if that just comes about by just the people that know their existence is in jeopardy, right?
Yeah.
You've got to basically keep it together, right? Because it's brutal, this war. And I try to, not that I'm not running around Kiev trying to motivate people, but
Mm.
when we get into those difficult discussions in groups, um, I basically, again, I pull from the history that I'm familiar with, Ukrainian history, that is, and my parents and so forth, right? Um, Ukraine's been a country that has been brutalized by Russia,
Mm.
right? By
Yeah.
Stalin, by the Bolsheviks, by the Tsars of Russia, right? And other countries as well, right? And this is the first time in history that we feel we have a strong army. The world knows pretty much who we are, and that's motivational. That motivates us to basically fight this extremely powerful enemy, right?
Yeah.
And but it's the way I also explain it is it's really, there are other elements in history that Ukrainian army has gone against. It was actually the Bolshevik army, but this is really the first time in history where Ukrainians formed into groups like a proper army,
Mm.
can basically fight directly with Russians, right?
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about that, right? Because you're protecting
Absolutely.
your country, you're pushing, trying to get obviously them out of the country, right?
Yeah, no. Honestly, the examples of patriotism and collectivism in a positive sense that I've seen, for anything that I've ever criticized lightly, the Ukrainian side for, all that other stuff totally overshadows any critiques that I may have. I didn't like the photo shoot for, I don't know if it was GQ or whatever it was. I thought that was uh, tone deaf, but whatever. And then the only other thing that actually, maybe I can talk to you about this a little bit, because it could be that I just don't understand that this is a natural byproduct of being invaded. But I see a lot of videos of Russian soldiers being like ambushed because they're eating or something, and
Hmm.
um, and it's like almost comical or celebratory when their bodies get blown apart. And is that just a byproduct of war? Or do you think that maybe like some? I'm not saying that. Listen, I'm not saying that defines anything or anyone, but I find it troubling. Is that just like, well, James, they're being invaded. You have to understand that these people are being like, are killing Ukrainian people, and like, it's a tough question. It's almost philosophical, but
Yeah, I've seen those same videos. I've also seen videos that the Russians post as well, and it's not a tit for tat. Um, a bit of it, yeah. How do I explain this? A bit of it is Ukrainian sense of humor in a dark sense. There is that type of sense of humor here, right?
yeah, I'm picturing the guy
And
moving the landmine with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth. That guy. Do you remember that guy?
right,
Yeah.
yeah, and then yeah, I posted a video where there was Russian soldier taking a dump and they dropped a bomb on him. I laughed. Sorry,
Yeah. It's a tough
just
way to go. Tough way to go.
it is a tough way to go. Yeah, he sort of lost his shit. Anyway, we're moving on. So yeah, a bit of it is that sense of humor, I feel, and a bit of it is the war and the brutality of the war. It's a way to cope, I guess.
Sometimes I feel like the communications that Zelensky is undertaking is has proven himself to be correct. That strategy, rallying the international community, inspiring people. I'm just curious, and I'm spitballing here, but how powerful it would be, because we often hear about, the Russian soldiers are not even being told that it is a war, and their families back. This is at the beginning, anyways. Their families are like almost surprised sometimes to find out they're in Ukraine, and I heard some heartwarming words from a Ukrainian official back in like April or something, talking about how, before we just blanket all of Russia as the enemy, we have to understand that the boys that are fighting on that side are probably being lied to. They're probably not prepared. They're probably not. They're probably frightened. And I wonder if Zelensky speaking directly to them might be a better idea than videos of Russian soldiers taking shits and then being blown up.
Right. You're okay. So you're basically saying that Zelensky should sort of speak to the Russian population.
Yeah.
That's sort of what you're getting at.
Yeah.
He does in fact do that.
Okay.
In
Okay.
some of his addresses, he will actually speak Russian. So
Hmm.
he'll change over to Russian, and he'll basically will look at the camera and he'll deliver a message to Russians, right?
Okay.
And it's not a message that we will destroy you. It's basically letting them know what really is going on. So I've seen that time and time again
Okay.
with regards to that. Look, everything that I've seen Zelensky and his wife, by the way,
Yep.
do, I think is extremely admirable. They've got to get the message out, and I think kudos to them. They're doing a really good job in getting that message out to the world,
Hmm.
to make sure that the messaging is as clear as it can be, as understandable as it can be. And I was at a tech conference in Lisbon, and Zelensky's wife was one of the keynote speakers, and she just did an amazing job, just delivering that message and letting everyone know that what is going on in Ukraine and how you can help Ukraine and so forth. So yeah, they've got to do that, right? So.
Yeah, and I'm not ever looking to arbitrarily criticize Zelensky or anything. I do sometimes feel a little bit, they're currently in the infallibility phase of their popularity, where you can't criticize them because then you're. And I guess I'm contrarian, so I try to like, I'll show you. But overall, I think the guy gets top marks, right? Like it's hard to
Mhm.
argue with how he's communicated. I'm so cynical, so when I see him I actually like that he doesn't dress up when he goes to visit countries. I like that. He's casual.
Yeah, there's something when he spoke to the U.S. Congress. A few people didn't like the fact that he was in a suit, right? And
Because if Americans are
okay,
known for anything, it's stellar etiquette.
right, exactly.
You know, Jesus Christ.
So there's you're going to get those sort of people that'll criticize that kind of stuff, but I don't think that's a big issue, right? So
Okay. We have to leave in about 4 minutes. Before we go, I'd like to know how your life has changed. How transformational has this last year or so been for you and your family? Is it like life defining? Is it a fold in the chapter and it's almost like a new life? Because it must be pretty substantial where you are now, and knowing that 2 years ago you could never obviously predict that you'd be where you are now.
yeah, I would definitely say it's life defining. There's elements of all of this that are quite amazing. Just the types of people you meet, how you're helping people. I I've been acknowledged. I was actually it's interesting. I was given a medal by the Ukrainian defense minister for my service to the country, to the military.
Wow.
And that's amazing, right? I was very shocked and quite honored to have received that. But yeah, it's definitely life defining. Um, and at times I feel that you're so your head's so in the game that at times when we leave the country and we're in Poland or another country, it's interesting, right? Because you see people smiling and happy and going on vacations, and
Yeah.
you're on social media, and it's almost bothersome, right?
Yeah.
It plays on you, right? Because there's a normality out there, and life is not normal here, and everyone should be on the same page, but that's not the way life works, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting as well. But Yeah, it's an amazing sort of last almost going to be a year now since the war broke out, and all the experiences. It's obviously hard to touch on every single one of them and all the different ones
Yep.
that I've encompassed. But yeah, definitely life defining and quite interesting.
Alex Fesiak from Heart of the World, Ukraine. Thank you very much for joining us. I would love to. We have plans on doing another show with James sometime in the future. So please give him my best and tell him thank you for everyone back at home, and thank you
I
for coming
will.
today. Thank you for coming on Blackball today.
Excellent. Thanks, James. Thanks for having
Okay.
me, man.
See you, Alex.
All right.
What a good man. You know, um, sort of like half fortunate and half brilliant. Like he was already doing a job that could be slid into um, a priority box as it pertained to Ukrainian military needs regarding equipment. And to just be able to slide into that role and do things that prove to be patriotic for. Again, he has two home countries, Ukraine and Canada, but to do something instrumental for your country during a time of war, just, I mean, when you're not a soldier, it can be tough to find some sort of like pride. Like, am I a cog in this wheel of fighting back against this invader, or am I not? And some people struggle with that. But Alex and his fiance seem to be living exactly the kind of life they're supposed to be living right now. Like there's no doubt in my mind that these two people. It's no accident that they're doing what they're doing. And as I mentioned on the show, but I don't think I could belabor this point because I think it's both huge and important, is that they have personal face-to-face relationships with the people who direct benefitly from them importing equipment. That is sounds rare. As I was speaking with Alex, I asked him about how rare it was, and he's like, "No, there's some people have these relationships, but in that sort of ecosystem, like it's every good salesman understands that nothing can beat a face-to-face, especially if you're good at sales. This doesn't feel like that. This feels more like the personal communications with not even a client. The client is the military itself. These are the end users, and it demonstrates something that goes beyond commerce or beyond the mandate of a charity. I think it demonstrates and sort of symbolizes we're in this together. We're not just you're not just a line item to us. So I give him props for that. So thank you, Alex, again for joining us. Tonight on Blackball, the second half of our doubleheader, we have Canadian screenwriter Frank Caruso. When I went to his book page today, and there was I don't have it open, so I'm not going to say her name because I don't remember it. But there was a woman that sort of featured prominently all over his photography page, and I think her name was Andrea Johnson, I think, but let's just say Andrea. And I talked to him on the phone, and I said, Frank, I'm pretty sure that woman's your muse. She has a very muse-ish sort of feel to her. And it turns out it's his fiance. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Do you know how dangerous it is to have your fiance be your muse? I mean, the muse might not last that long, buddy. Because I like to project my relationship issues onto other people. But Frank's going to talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be an independent Canadian film producer. It's not an easy job. We were talking about the wage gap that exists in the Canadian producer industry or field. You have one end of the spectrum that they don't even like grind. It's just that, funds exist, and then they'll get called and be like, do you have anything to pitch to this? Yeah, I'll pitch that. Okay, you're probably going to get it. Like, I'm sort of surmising that it's fixed because it kind of is. People get cash in the Canadian grant system for film and TV, often based on reputation. Will this generate a return on the investment of the grant? Whatever. It's a grant, so I don't really know how that works. But in any event, it's free money. And so it'll be interesting to sort of take a peek behind the curtain of Canadian production. I'm really interested in knowing if the reason that a Canadian production and American production both shot in the city of Toronto, why you can tell after 4 seconds which one is the Canadian production, and if that is solely to do with money or the size of the budget. I'm just curious because often it's the same people that are doing these films. So okay, that's 9:00 tonight. We will have Frank Caruso. Casual Friday obviously is on Friday. Is that tomorrow? Is this Thursday? Oh my God, that's great. I don't have to book any more last minute guests. I'm so happy, guys. I don't know if we have a theme for Casual Friday this week. I don't really do any other drugs except for shrooms and weed. I don't want to do shrooms again. I also don't want to turn Casual Friday into some sort of branding project for my illicit drug use. That probably wouldn't go over well in the long run. Hopefully cocaine doesn't land in my lap because I can't say no to cocaine, but it hasn't landed in my lap since I've lived in a forest, surprisingly. So that's fine. So Frank Caruso tonight at 9 p.m. and then tomorrow, Casual Friday, also at 9 p.m. And we will see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.